time has passed and generally now people are more accepting of what might be happening, that's why you've not said anything. So it would be well worth sending in comments. Obviously reiterating what we said first time around would be sensible, but it would also be worth looking at the reasons that Sedgemoor have highlighted in their delegated report and potentially maybe combining those with them if again we support those reasons, just to make a comprehensive reason as to why we think that the appeal should fail. It is being dealt with by a written reps, which basically written representations, so it's not a public inquiry, there won't be sort of hearings taking place. Sedgemoor sends in all their written comments. People who've commented previously have the right again to send in their comments, and the inspector will go through all of those together with the applicant's justification as to why he thinks all those objections are wrong. Normally the inspector will come out and visit the site, but they will do that unannounced generally, and they will do it on their own so that they're not influenced by either side, and then they literally will just go through all that paperwork and make their decision based on everything that's been submitted, which again is why it's sensible for us to make sure that if we feel that it is important to comment, we should be doing so again.
When does it have to be in by?
I would suggest we get it in as soon as we can. I mean, the thing with the appeals is they can take a long time to go through. But I would suggest once we make our decision tonight, obviously, if Owen can send something off shortly.
Tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock?
That would be it.
Yeah, I went fast, you know. No.
Can I ask a question? The appeal seems to be on grounds that it took a reasonable period of time to consider the application. One assumes that that's a reasonable ground to make an appeal and it's gone through. Whether or not it is substantiated is another question, but one assumes that it is up for appeal and that's...
Yeah, I mean, what he originally applied for was, in effect, he appealed on non-determination because he said that Sedgemoor hadn't made the decision within the time they should have done. In actual fact, they made the decision the week that he made his appeal. So initially, the first appeal was dismissed because they said, actually, this has been determined, so it's not non-determination anymore. And then he had the right to come back and appeal on the other grounds that he does. I mean, in terms of length of time, when you've got a planning application, there is a conversation, in effect, that goes on between the applicant and the planning department. Now, the planning department have to have sufficient information to be able to make a reasoned decision. There was quite a bit of correspondence between Sedgemoor and the applicant, where the Sedgemoor planning officer was requesting further and more detailed information. And once they received the information they required, they made, as mentioned, I think by Richard earlier, a fairly quick decision. The difficulty they would have, had they made the decision without having the full information, then you could appeal on the grounds that you haven't made it on the full information. And also, one of the dangers with an appeal is that an applicant can add further information to the appeal even after they've made the appeal. So often, they will in effect go into negotiation with the inspector, and things sometimes get tweaked during the appeal, which again means that we as the parish and Sedgemoor don't get to be involved in terms of some of that discussion.
So, do you wish me to send in comments?
Yeah, well, I think our comments should probably be a bit more detailed, and we haven't had the opportunity to, if you like, to place the planning application, the original planning application, before this particular council.
Timing is probably going to be the issue, because obviously it wouldn't wait until September.
No.
I would suggest.
And also, Colin, you're on stronger ground as well if you're reiterating what you said last time, because that was a decision of the council. If we bring in new issues that haven't considered, then that may be an issue. But as I say, if there are ways that Sedgemoor have raised the issue, because we raised, from my recollection of seeing what the council decided, we raised a number of issues.
We did.
Which Sedgemoor have picked up on most of, and they might be phrases in there that you want to use in terms of bolstering the view of the council rather than necessarily changing it.
Can I just, sorry, ask a question? So it seems to have been rejected certainly by us, and it would appear by of the planning officer on 3 grounds. The access, the apology report missing certain information about reptiles, and also the flood risk zone. In the appeal, it doesn't seem that those have necessarily been addressed. It's more about the timescales. Am I correct?
Yes.
So they're still outstanding,
Yeah.
and they weren't submitted prior to the decision was made on the basis of those certain information that's still outstanding.
Yes.
Hence, it was rejected on those grounds.
Yes. But as I say, that's the danger, that the applicant can then submit that to the inspector and say, well, there you are, I've now met that objection.
But so that it's not there now, but thank you for making that clear.
Have you got a copy of our original
I have.
objection?
I have.
Do you have it available?
I haven't got it here.
No.
So, no, I haven't.
Colin, may I interject there? So, in the delegated thingy, your comments are within that, are in it. So you could paraphrase it.
The delegated report is very good reading actually in terms of just being up to speed.
Yeah, but the parishes,
Yeah.
notes are there.
On the second page, I think.
On the second
I think
page?
it's the second page. Just go
Sorry?
quickly.
Page?
On the second page at the top here. It's going to stay.
A to G.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we've listed them all there. I think we just reiterate them once again. We've got concern over the applicant's involvement in writing all the supporting documents and lack of impartiality, management of foul water on the site, which was discussed, environmental concerns, no timetable of plan, architectural effect and appearance, concerns on the temporary buildings being installed, no specific detail. In other words, we felt it was an eyesore anyway. Highways and road safety due to traffic increase and flood risk, no countermeasures in place. Those were our items A to G. So I suggest then to reiterate once again our concerns. We repeat these concerns and we register them with the appeal process so that we can ensure that not only the residents' concerns are registered, but also those of us. Once again, are you all happy that we do that? Bob?
Could I have one further suggestion? Technically, it's not strictly planning, but it might be worth just in your comments making reference to the fact that since the decision was made originally, there have been a new council elected, and it was still the view of the council. So it's not just the same people who are here reiterating what they said. It is a new council that has considered whether to send this in, and that's what they felt was worth commenting.
Okay. Allow that up a bit.
Thank you. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks for pointing that out. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
I think we should just indicate whether we're all happy with that. Would you like to indicate?
But I will send you a copy prior to sending it to Sedgmore, so you will see what I'm sending, because I'm sending it on your behalf. So you need to be happy that what I'm sending you're happy with. All right?
So you'll want a response from us?
I would like a response fairly quickly if possible. David.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
So will you respond then to Owen by email, please?
Are we expecting that tomorrow?
You are.
Next week.
I am.
If not sooner. Does that suit your requirement? Okay. Right, it's a much reduced meeting agenda tonight because we don't normally have an August meeting. But I think that the next matter does concern us all, and which concerns the community shop, and we'll bring you up to date on where we are with that, because we need to make some decisions on the way forward. Can you move it up? I'll leave Owen to go into the detail of this, and probably Brian, but Bob. But we instructed an architect to. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, Fred. We instructed an architect to come up with some designs, and we did sort of drill down into what the best requirements were, because clearly what we're doing is we're demolishing the existing toilet block, so that's existing there, and we're replacing it with a new building which is shown on the southwest elevation there. You can just drop it down a little bit, because that's it, lovely. So we're knocking down the toilet block, and essentially we're building a new shop which will be fronted very much like that. But what we've done, we've moved the public toilet facility to what we thought was the best site to be, that is in just off the car park, so that people going to the village green or parking can use those, and for various other reasons we felt it best to site it that side. We think that's, and we've had a brief meeting with the shop committee representatives, and they are happy with that. So effectively it more or less doubles the square footage that they've got. We are merely providing a shell for the shop. We're not fitting it out. All we're doing is providing an empty space that the shop will then apply for permission, planning permission, to fit out as their shop. So it'll be bare walls, there'll be no electrical installation within it, there'll be no lighting, there'll be no shelving, there'll be no flooring, there'll be no plastering on the inside. It will be a shell. There will be incoming electricity and incoming water. That's it. We have responsibility this side. That's a small store that the parish council require, and these are the two disabled toilets, which will be public toilets, but both disabled. Inside there will be a small store for the shop, but the rest will be an open area. Okay? Bob, do you want to add to that now?
I think you covered it, Colin. I mean, as Colin said, right way through this process, we've been looking at providing the facility for the shop. The reason why we're not going into the detail in terms of internals is they're going to have their own needs, and it's better that they do it. The advice we've had is that it's normal commercial practice as well when you're building these sort of facilities, that you provide in effect services to it. How they run it from there is up to them. And this way, hopefully, as Colin said, it's giving them a facility which is significant. Even the internal storeroom, is studs, so potentially we're giving them the square, and then how they choose to break that up or develop it would be up to them to do in conjunction with us. But obviously from here, if we decide to go ahead, then we need to start making decisions on finance, we need to make decisions on going for planning, and ultimately we would have to get building regs for the development. They would be subject to getting their own building regs for the fit out, because obviously that comes under different legislation for them, and it makes, if we try to do all the building regs together, we can't get the building signed off until everything inside is finished, whereas again the advice we've had is it is better for us to get our buildings signed off and then they take it further as the next step.
Well, just really saying more on the financial side, really. One of the conditions that was put forward when we agreed as a council was that we would have to seek permission to apply for a loan from the PWLB. This permission would be sought from the Communities Secretary. Now, last autumn we actually achieved that permission. We've got it here in writing. There it is in all its glory, with the permission there which is laid out there for a sum of £80,000 for the council to borrow over a 25-year period. That permission ceases on the 23rd of November of this year. So we only get 12 months to actually enact the permission that we've been given. Now the problem is that since last year, things have changed quite dramatically on the costing side of things. Building materials, all sorts of things have gone up and up and up. Our planning agent, in fact, has taken longer than he would have wanted to have taken to get to this stage because he's been so busy with building projects. But the fact of the matter is that we will start to incur now costs from this moment onwards. From the time we press the button and say we'll go for planning, we will be incurring costs from day one virtually. So we need the parish council to support the project in order for us to be able to do that, because clearly it is a big, it's a big sum of money to be asking the taxpayer to be paying. I mean, obviously we will have a lease on the building. Apparently the management committee will have to sign a lease under agreed terms, whatever those terms are, when we sit down and do the agreements. And of course that money will be recovered during the lease period. But in the initial stages, the council itself will be effectively paying those early years costs on the loans. At the moment, it's interesting because when we first went for this approval, interest rates were down very low. The problem we now have, of course, is that interest rates are going that way. So when we come to actually get the loan, the chances are the interest rates are going to be higher than they would have been had we done it a year ago. So that will affect our payments and therefore pressures on the budget that we set. We understand that the 80,000 plus our own internal reserve fund that we had allocated to this would have been initially okay, but we now believe it won't be, and we will have to go for increased borrowing. I'm not sure at what level, but certainly we will need to get some increased borrowing on what we went for last year, which again will result in us going through a process to get that increased borrowing requirement approved by the government department. So it's not a quick fix. It all takes quite a bit of time to get through. And you probably know from your own dealings with, if you've dealt with government departments, they don't exactly rush with these things. You can't put an application on a Monday and get something back by a Friday. It's not that sort of arrangement. So the council needs to agree, and I've made a note on things that this council will need to agree. You need to agree whether we go for a planning application, which has been obviously proposed by Paul Martin. Whether we go for tenders for an exact costing, we know roughly what the cost might be, but not anything like an accurate cost. And we will also need to make, and you'll need to give permission for that, we will also need to make a pre-lease agreement with the shop management committee, because without a pre-lease agreement, clearly we would be left rather exposed, because if we actually went ahead and invested and borrowed and started building, we would need to make sure that we've got a commitment from the shop.
And this is now an agreement, this is now an negotiation, is it?
Oh yes, I mean, we would meet up with Colin, Bob and myself, would obviously meet up with the shop and we would talk them through that. But you need to give us permission to be able to go and do that, because the working group we have with Bob and Colin and myself, and Melina, of course, sorry, Melina, don't have any delegated powers. So whatever we decide has to come to the council first, and the full council has to have the opportunity to say yea or nay. That's always been the case.
And it's a full repairing lease that you're entering into?
Sorry?
It's a full repairing lease
Yes.
that
Yes.
you're entering into, so
Yeah.
it's only
Yeah.
liability for common parts that they may have access to?
I mean, this has
That's
got,
to be dealt with in the
this has
details
obviously
now.
got to be decided upon. I mean, we've got our solicitor, Charles Fleming, who will obviously help us, and in fact would draw up the agreements that are needed. We wouldn't be drawing them up ourselves, it would be done through the legal processes. But, you know, we need to start the process at a given point. And I think that point we have now reached, because we're going to start pressing buttons and spending money going through the planning process. We might have some costs with even the tendering process, so I gather, because, you know, builders are very, very busy at the moment, and we might get some costs even at that stage. So we do need some resolutions to be passed to support, you know, what we're proposing.
Yeah.
The previous parish council set out these 5 conditions. Have all 5 of those conditions been met?
Not entirely.
No.
One of them is wavering a bit, but almost there. And of course the other one is that we can build the actual shop within the budgets that have been set by the council. So at the moment that has not been set because we haven't actually got any tenders. So that one has not really been passed yet, but the others have, certainly. The one that you're querying, I think, is on the existing shop unit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, can we proceed before those 5 conditions have been met? Because it seems to be laid out that they need to be met before any further progress is made.
That's an interesting point. I think Bob's got a comment to make, but I'll just start it. First of all, the shop itself at the moment in time only has 2 years on its planning application out there before it starts to have to be renewed. And the important thing is we've got to start the process, because if we don't start the process, we don't get planning, we don't get our funding in time, we've lost. Okay, we're back to square one. So we are literally on a track, and I think time has gone on with the condition of the old shop now, where, to be honest with you, we've moved on from there really, and it will.
But that's clearly one of the 5 conditions.
No, I accept that, but I'm
have to
trying to
be
explain
met.
to you why we need to move on. We cannot go backwards. If we go backwards, Melina, we lose the application for our money. We are and the shop is back to square one. We are back to square one. We cannot stop the train now because that one condition is not satisfied. And even if we tried to satisfy that condition, I don't think we'd get anywhere between you and I. Bob?
Yeah, I think also, I mean, in terms of the parish council, that was the resolution of the previous parish council, and that obviously applies to the council. We're an ongoing body. It's beyond, and we've moved on more than 6 months from when that decision was taken, which means basically we are free to relook at those conditions and decide ourselves whether those conditions are still valid now, whether we feel that they are ones that we should be sticking to, or whether we feel that parts of it have been met and not. So we're not bound by those 5 conditions in the sense that it is up for this council to decide what the criteria are that we now wish to move forward on or not.
Right, okay.
When we make a decision, within 6 months of that decision, we're not supposed to go back on it again. You're not supposed to take it
Go
back.
back on it, or it just becomes sort of as if it was never made.
Not revisit it.
We're not supposed to revisit a
not
decision
revisit.
within 6 months. So
I don't think this is revisiting it though, is it? It's
No,
just
what I'm
saying
saying
that
is we're
these
beyond-
conditions were...
yeah. So literally, we are now in a position where we can, if we wish, relook at those conditions, decide whether they are still valid now and whether we feel that they are still appropriate.
Okay.
What's your feeling then, Sarah?
So thank you for the clarification on that, because it makes me very nervous if that's a decision of the council, then to go forward on the basis we just waive, or, you know, we'd obviously have to agree to waiving that condition. If we've agreed and passed it, something we would consider as a prerequisite to giving consent to progression. Do we know what the legal status is of the shop, the current shop, just in terms of what risk there is there? I think that might just help.
So in
us.
effect, the current sort of planning legal side of it is that there is still, the property that was the shop is still registered as a business premises, it's never changed its use, so it is still a shop. So someone could go in there tomorrow and start a shop.
Sure. Yeah.
Now obviously anyone going in there would have to take into account the position that there is an operational community shop, and whether they would want to go head to head in that sort of market, that will be their choice.
Yeah.
Because again, when it comes down to planning, competition isn't a matter, so we wouldn't be able to say you can't do it because there's a shop, but it would be, I would guess, a very brave shopkeeper who would go head to head with an existing shop. But of course a shop is a wide range of things anyway, so other uses could go in there, and certainly my understanding was that there was a potential buyer who was looking at running it as a shop, but nothing to do with the sort of retail shop here, it was something completely different.
Yeah, that's what my concern was. It's going to remain a commercial outfit, but it's going to be something significantly different. So in terms of that question, if I ask it again, do we know where it is in terms of that legal transaction? So it's actually aborted, that deal has gone off the table?
Well, my understanding is that is not
It's
currently
not.
on the table anymore,
Okay, so and we don't think there's any other.
not that I've heard. But
Okay, it just puts into perspective in terms of the rest. Okay.
But it would be fair to say it's a hypothetical position that another shop could open up.
Yeah.
Could open up.
As time goes on, the probability is, of course, this shop that we're proposing to build, frankly, wouldn't probably get out of the ground until probably early next year. And there's, I suppose, a fair chance, or high probability, that itself would be resolved anyway. But I think Bob's point is important one, is that we've revisited and we've decided, if we take that view, that we can redecide to make a different condition, which is, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that at all. Perfectly legitimate thing to do.
My only observation is that an agreement release of the community shop would need to be something that happens fairly early on in the next steps to ensure that that's ticked off and that risk is covered before we move forward.
It's one of those. We would not proceed with anything.
Absolutely not. No.
Unless you've got it.
Yeah.
And really we're in a bit of a difficult position because we really need to get a price for this building. Just because we had a price on the top of our heads based on budgets, it may not be that, and we will have to revisit the finances. You were given a circular by Owen to tell you how our funds were made up in terms of grant approval and certain reserves that we're carrying, but I'm concerned that we don't rob the bank, if you like, and leave the parish council with no means of operating to do various things we need to do. We've already committed ourselves to do the car park and various footpath enhancements, which is a drain on our resources. So we've got to be quite careful in how we approach it all. But we must start the process. If we don't start the process, we don't get anywhere. And that's why we're coming to you this evening. We'd like you, one, to allow us to enter into a proper planning process. Two, give us permission to go out to obtain some form of accurate budgets. And then we know exactly where we are. And then we will have to come back to you once we've got those budgets to see how the finances all stack up.
That's my query, is do we have any idea of budgets at this stage, but you're going to come back to us once you've got that
Absolutely.
I think you need to know what those
Yeah,
absolutely. No, you're-
going to be in the time.
The only thing you can be sure of is they're going to be higher than they originally were thought.
Timescales and construction costs.
Yes.
Yeah.
It could well be that, I mean, worst case scenario, we've got to go back to borrow some more money.
Okay, and in terms of the original requirement to secure the loan by November, there's no extension, that's got process got to be restarted.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, this document lays it out quite clearly, and it says 1 year from the date given above, the approval is valid and no other applications will be acceptable after that date. But, of course, if we make a new application for increasing the funds, then, of course, that's a new application. So, of course, then we'd have to go through the process of getting that approval. But in order to do that, we need to know what we're talking about. You know, what sort of sums are we talking that are additional? You know, the other thing I did mention to Colin earlier on, actually, to say that obviously VAT is an issue because, of course, as a council we can claim back VAT, but initially it'll have to be paid up front. And so therefore we have to make sure we have enough cash flow within our accounts to pay money which we'll eventually reclaim. Because it takes about 4 months to reclaim back VAT from HMRC. Now normally on the average amounts that we're talking about, that's not an issue. You know, we're talking a couple of £1,000 maximum. Whereas on this project it could be a significant amount of money. So they're all things that we just need to make sure that we've covered.
So it would be a good idea to get this ball rolling then, like you said, move it on and come back with the
And come back.
exact figures.
Yeah, we've got to keep moving.
Yeah. So the sooner the better, really.
Yeah. So could I propose, please, that you support the Parish Council in going forward with a formal planning application on this project, please? That's the first one. Do I have a seconder for that? Bob? All those in favour? That's carried, so we go forward. Secondly, are you happy, therefore, that we approach contractors where possible to get some form of outline budget costs so that we know where we are? Bob?
Could I just add to that? I only sort of touched on it in that if we're going out to get tenders and such, then it may well be that Paul Martin is going to have to put together a sort of tender brief so that they're all tendering on the same basis.
Yes.
So there will be an
Yeah,
cost.
there will be a
Cost
cost.
for that.
Yeah.
Cost.
Can I just be
Yes, John.
very obvious thought in my head from the drawings? The building you've shown there benefits from the southwest profile. From an eco-sustainability point of view, it would be very good for solar panels. So in terms of your costings, and if you're going to do the roof once, in terms of where it's going to be used for, my own thought would be that would be a perfect place for solar panels.
Yeah, go on.
It's possible to get the picture.
Yeah, of course it is, yeah.
It was raised.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, with the architect.
Yep.
One of the design elements that's within the proposal is you'll see they put hitched roofs on either side of the
You can't.
of the main roof.
Yep.
So that's primarily because obviously that's going to have an impact on the potentially parish hall light down the side. So they want to keep the roof profile low. The architect's comment to us was that the roof line that is most beneficial for solar is the one that is in effect compromised. And his feeling was that the number of panels we could get on there would not be sufficient to actually make it worth doing it. But it was an issue that was raised with him specifically. Actually, it came up in the discussions with the shop committee, and that was his reason for not taking that ahead at this time. But in terms of construction, obviously, the building of it will be done to a standard that is good in terms of insulation and trying to get the benefit through materials that will be used.
It's a standard cavity constructed building. Yeah, fair face brickwork on the outside, blocks on the inside, insulated in the core. So, do we have your permission, please, to proceed with some form of tendering exercise which will involve additional expenditure, probably to Paul Martin, the architect, in order to get this, but we need to get up and running. That's the proposal. You second it, or you ask a question? You second it, Melina. Thank you. All those in favour? Great, so we go forward.
And the third one, there's a third
Yeah.
one.
Oh,
We need to have discussions with the shop management about obtaining a pre-lease agreement.
yeah.
And in order for us to have that discussion with the shop, we need your permission to do so. So that's what we're asking for, the third part of the resolution.
That's the proposal. Seconder? Sarah, all those in favour? We go for it. Okay.
Thank you.
Zigzag lines.
Nearly there. Zigzag lines. Carry forward.
Prior resolution to do prior.
Yeah, I've offered, we have a Clark's local forum where we all sort of get together and talk about our councils, feedback. And I've decided this year that I'd like to host it because it's always been hosted by Burnham Town Council, and Burnham Town Council's Deputy Clerk is now going to Bridgewater, so she doesn't actually have the facility now to be able to engage with it. So I've offered this room to have our local Clark's forum in September, and I need your permission in order to hire the room for that purpose.
All those in favour?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that concludes our main agenda. John, any matters of report for the next meeting?
No.
No? Amanda? Tracy?
One, not our footpath, but when you go through the gate into the National Trust, there are some issues with steps.
Yeah, they've been, the cattle have destroyed them. Yeah.
Can we feed back into National Trust?
Yeah.
Or
It's horrendous.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Good with that.
Melina? No? Sarah?
just a couple of things. We agreed at the last meeting that we would review Jason's contract each month in terms of the SLAs or agreements and terms. Is that something?
We will.
We will, but this is one of those extraordinary meetings.
So it doesn't
Yes.
count.
Yeah,
Fine.
so, yeah.
And also the other thing is, I was approached by someone in Brent Knoll who said that East Brent Council had contributed a small donation to Ralph's Wood, the owners of Ralph's Wood, just as a thank you for allowing the village people and tourists to use the wood. Just a small contribution for petrol costs, etc. And that it might be nice if Brent Knoll could reciprocate and do something similar. So.
Put it on the agenda.
We'll put it on the agenda. If you've got some more information about it as well to support that, that'd be great. Yeah. Malcolm?
No.
Yeah. Jane? No. David? No. Bob?
Just a quick update, you may have noticed there are some white markings going on the road on Brent Street around the school. It's the first markings to where the new signs are going to be going from the 20th. So they've actually marked the road. You'll see the WW, which I don't know why they're called wigwag signs, but the ones that flash. So when a WW is appeared, that's where the flashing sign is going to go. They have made a mark near the sign that we've got our bracket on. So I was going to suggest we might want to take our bracket off because they may remove that sign and we don't want to lose our bracket.
Yeah, can I bring up footpaths, the Horsefield footpath and the tanks, footpath around the tanks, please. Okay. I'll speak to Amanda and David, are you on the footpaths with Amanda? You're on the footpaths with Amanda? Okay. I'll email with.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
Malcolm's on green this morning.
Malcolm's, you're on green.
Max is doing green. So we're hanging on now to do our little training.
Yeah.
I'm very happy with that.
Thank you very much, everyone. Close the meeting.